This meeting is being recorded.
Ooh.
I know, so proper.
Yes, I know, right? Zoom make sure everybody knows you're being recorded.
I think even my dogs heard it outside.
Probably. They need to know as well.
Right. They need to offer their consent, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Karla, we're so excited to have you on the podcast today. Thanks for agreeing to be our guest.
Likewise.
Yeah, awesome. Well, just to get started, can you kind of let our audience know a little bit about who you are, what you do, that kind of stuff?
Loaded question. Okay, so I am the Chief Clinical Officer for Aspen Growth Coaching, and I live in sunny South Florida. So you guys are all cozied up. I am hot. I am sweating over here. And so I work in the mental health industry. I do have a background in substance abuse and eating disorders. And so prior to that, I was a chef. So I think I've had multiple lives in my short life. I am rather young. So
That's awesome. And so how kind of tell us a little bit more about that. What's your journey like from chef to mental health expert?
yeah, so it's interesting because I grew up with my grandfather being in the culinary industry field. He was a baker, and so that was something that kind of I naturally gravitated towards. And when we moved over here from Puerto Rico, the school that I went to had a culinary team, like a culinary department. And it was something that I kind of just, like I said, it was very organic for me. And so throughout high school, it's really all I did. I continued competing. I continued just being around people that were interested in culinary arts. And well, I got a scholarship. And so I ended up just going that way. I've always liked cooking and I've always liked, being in the industry, but I never considered it as part of my future until I got the scholarship. And so I kind of rolled with the punches and went that way.
Yeah.
And so go ahead.
I was just going to say, what kind of things do you cook? Because I'm really interested in this.
It's interesting because so long as I'm in the kitchen, I'm a happy person. So long as I'm back there, it's therapeutic. So even like looking back now, it's always been about the therapeutic process for me. It's always been about just how much I can step away from my own brain and just kind of be present in the moment. And whether that means sharing time with my little one or sharing time with my family as we did back then, it was always very much about just the human context of it, right? And the interpersonal relationship that we had. I just didn't realize it back then.
Yeah. Well, and that's so fascinating to me to kind of see the correlation between, a chef and then later doing therapeutic work and how it all ties in. And I think that's probably for a lot of our listeners and students out there, it's a matter of, figuring out what works for you and finding those connections of what is it that I'm really craving at a deeper level to do as a career, right?
Yeah, the food didn't talk back to me. So I would talk back to the food, but the food would either tell me it would come out too salty if I wasn't in the best of moods. So now I know. Now as an adult, I know, and even my daughter will tell me, she's like, "Mommy, your mojo is not working." So now as an adult, I know, but back then the food would tell me it would come out atrocious if I wasn't in the best of moods. So it was very much an external process of what was happening internally. I didn't notice back then.
Yeah, that is awesome. That is so true. That's funny. Hopefully the food didn't talk back to you, maybe on good days, right? So like some days you might be like, did you say something?
Yeah,
did I hear that?
On great days, everybody would agree that, I belonged in the kitchen. And then on my not so great days, people would look at me like, are you sure this is what you want to do with your life?
Yeah. So you had some pretty, what some might consider crazy experiences while being a chef.
Yeah.
Like Versace Mansion, right? Yeah. Like tell us a little bit about that journey, because holy cow, that I feel like a lot of people would find that pretty interesting.
Yeah, so I think what has made me successful, at least in both the realms that I've decided to go down, is I've always surrounded myself with some pretty amazing human beings. I am just naturally gravitated towards the type of outspoken and just very sure of themselves kind of human. And if anything has served me right in this life has been that, just really knowing who is important, and not necessarily from that realm, right? But who is willing to teach me the ropes, right? And just by being in their direct area, I learned, right? And I always position myself in that way of, well, if you're willing to teach me, I'm willing to learn. And so that happened while I was working in Miami Beach. And, you know, working there long enough, you're going to bump into a bunch of people. You're going to bump into a lot of opportunities if you're willing to place yourself in that position. And so that's how I ended up at Versace Mansion. Now, I will say it does sound like glitz and glam, and it was not that at all for me. There's not much I can go into it just because of the signed waivers that I have, right? But at that point, I was a mom. I was a young mom because I had my little one when I was 20 years old, 2 months shy of turning 21. And I thought that I was going to be able to continue in that lifestyle and that pace, that overall pace of living, where I was working just insane amount of hours in this like that high speed kind of life. Mm-hmm. And that was very quickly something I realized I just couldn't continue doing. But yeah, Versace Mansion was definitely something that just sounded beautiful from the outside, but was just wreaking havoc internally for me.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's an important aspect for really everybody to know, right? It's like, okay, you can have this glam lifestyle with all the money in the world, but if you're burning yourself out, what's the real cost?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I was very comfortable, obviously, just, you know, for that position. I had made it to that position by the time I was like 20, 21 years old. So it was a very coveted position. It took me daily effort to safeguard that position because everybody was after it. And so it was a very difficult decision back then, but looking back on it now, it was such an easy decision for me to let it go, right? But it really took for me to be able to separate myself from, well, I've been working towards this dream for so many years and I'm finally here and I don't think that this is what I want. And so at that point, though quitting has just this, you know, this negative connotation towards it. Quitting to me just opened up my world into this whole other realm of interest that I had that I couldn't even peak interest into because I was just always so exhausted from the kitchen.
Yeah.
Fascinating. So the transition then, how did that happen? Because it seems like maybe your whole life up to this point was just being in the kitchen.
Yeah.
So now you're in mental health. And I see the connection, like you said, between the two, but how did that transition happen?
Yeah. So right after the kitchen, I decided I need to go back to school. I'm a mom. You know, I've grown up with this mentality of no one can ever take my learning away from me. You know, I could take that diploma with me anywhere I go. And being a young mom, that's really what I had going for me. I've always been very studious. I've enjoyed going to school. And so I decided, well, I don't know what I want to do, but I want to work with people. And so I knew at some point I was going to figure out how to do that, but I didn't know I wanted to get into psych just yet. And so I went into human resources with organizational behavior. Okay. I thought, okay, I'll go into this realm with the hotel and food industry knowledge that I have. I've worked both front and back of the house. Maybe I can just transfer that over. And so I did that. Not knowing, I mean, I knew how much I hated it because of the degree itself, but I just kept trekking along because, well, I already committed and that was just my headspace back then. Like I committed, I said yes to this, I'm just going to do it. And so I finally get my bachelor's and I know that I wanted to go into school again because I wasn't happy then and I wanted to continue moving along. And well, 10 years ago, a bachelor's was nothing. And it still is, you know, you have to continue going if you want to, well, depends. But, and so we had a tragedy in my family that just really put me in this space of just stopping, taking a hard look at my life and what was happening internally, looking around and saying, like, what do I want to do? And what do I want to do with this pain? Do I want to use it for better? Like, do I want to use it? Do I want to allow it to consume me? Or can I use this to be able to prevent other families to go through what my family went through? And that was a big, that was a pivotal moment for me, if you will, because that allowed for me, that amount of pain and that suffering and that grief really put me in this position of, just forcing me to look at some realities that I didn't before. And it forced me to grow up very quickly. So that's when I went into psych. And when I went into psych and I started going to school and going through all my classes, I felt madly in love with what it was. And I knew it was this sense of belongingness that I almost had with the kitchen, but it was very forced in that realm because I had to always fight for my spot there. This was just, I was having so many organic opportunities pop up, and it was just a very easy transition for me.
That's awesome. We have, at least, I'm not sure about our current student base, but over the last few years, I've spoken to so many of our students who many are in residential treatment, like a residential treatment setting, and they've experienced some kind of trauma or difficult thing in their lives. And quite a few have expressed the interest in going into the field of psychology because they're like, I'm now fascinated, like learning these tools that I learn, that my therapist has given me, this toolkit, and just learning about all the different aspects. It piqued their own interest and thought, maybe I could help others by going into this field, and just knowing how their own brain works through the process of trauma and like the healing and all that. It's super fascinating. So I feel like many people who might be listening can actually relate to that story.
Absolutely. I think it starts from a very selfish point, right? If you will, because it was for me to recover. It was for me to understand and to have the textbook knowledge behind the lived experience, right? Because I had 15 years of this lived experience, and mind you, I'm only 30. So this has been happening since I was really little. And so having to kind of reverse engineer everything that I had lived from a textbook portion, right? So to be able to see things that were just so clear and just right in front of me all along, then really opened up my eyes and said, okay, I'm not the only one that's struggling with this. And I know a way out, because I was able to pull myself out of those thoughts. I was able to pull myself and my family in many ways out of that rumination and out of those thoughts. And so I thought, if I could do that for my family, which we're Hispanic, my parents are, well, my dad's a baby boomer and we're Puerto Rican. So we have a certain cultural deficit already that we're working towards with here, and being able to do that for myself, and saying, this trauma really opened up doors for me. And this grief kind of tapped into a part of me that I think was like superhuman in many ways. And it really turned things around. And yes, having that level of grief and that deep pain was what allowed for me to feel as deep as I can, and allows for me to be as empathetic for others, to be able to be in that pain with others, to continue helping them.
Yeah. Well, and I think you bring up a good point. I'm a firm believer of like the experiences we have are those opportunities for us to then help other people, right? Because they might be experiencing something similar or close to what you've gone through. And it is a matter of choosing, how can I make this for the good, to heal and move on? And so while it has its selfish motivations in the beginning, I think it does benefit, so many people, because like you said, it's a matter of, there's so many stigmas that go into things, like cultural or religious or just whatever it might be. And so being able to kind of be that catalyst for someone, and especially the vulnerability of it all, because it is hard to just open up and be authentic and say, hey, I dealt with this, but let me be vulnerable so that you can see the path ahead and how you can come out of it on the other end is so powerful. And so I love that even students that are experiencing it are, hey, I could help somebody because of what I've been through, right? Taking that negative and turning it into something positive with purpose for themselves and for other people is pretty powerful.
Absolutely. And we are in an age, I call this a mental health renaissance. We are at an age where people are speaking up. People are talking about what their internal dialogue is. And though, I mean, I think there are parameters to that, and there is something to be said about privacy and about allowing your thoughts to actually just move forward, right? Not just stick in that sense that it started in. I grew up where we didn't talk about it. We just kind of moved on, and moving on meant a month, and then that turned to a year, and then that turned into several years. And it wasn't up until it kind of all just blew out of proportion where we were like, oh, we have to look back. Right. And so I think it's rather beautiful in many ways what's happening now, because we are in this position where socially we can talk about it. And I also believe that there are certain parameters behind that. We can't just be talking, out to the public domain like we do sometimes in social media about our problems. But it does make sense to reach out. It does make sense to talk about it and to talk about our vulnerabilities, because had I talked about this a lot longer ago, I think I would have been able to put myself in a position of helping out much more. Like, I think I help out a lot now, but I think I would have been able to put myself in this catapult of continuing to help others, especially in my community.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. And I agree. I think society in general is just way more open to the idea that, hey, we all struggle with our own mental health in some capacity, some more than others, and maybe some haven't experienced certain things that others have, and so our experiences shape who we become. But just the like I said, society's just more open to that. But on the flip side, I've also seen, and tell me what your experience is, maybe you've seen this, or maybe I don't know if it's viewed as a good thing or a negative thing, but you mentioned being kind of stuck in that place too and not moving forward. Do you ever notice where somebody might say, hey, it's a cool thing that I'm struggling with mental health and I want to be stuck in this space without moving forward? Have you seen that too? Because now it is so accepted of like, well, I'm just going to live in this space now.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I think, and I see it more with my clients. I see that there is this identifying with the fact that they are struggling and not necessarily wanting to move away from that, but being kind of stagnant in that space. And the fact of the matter is that once you overcome certain hurdles in your life, whether it's anxiety, whether it's trauma, whatever the case may be, you holding on to that is only going to perpetuate that progress, right? Or whatever it is that you're struggling with, right? And so for me, and I can speak for my own personal side of things, when I struggled with anxiety, which was the way that grief really manifested itself with me, was severe anxiety and so just on a social spectrum, and claustrophobia. I would wake up, well, it happened on one or two occasions where I would wake up to my boyfriend carrying me out of places just because I couldn't handle what was going on around me. And knowing me, I'm an extremely social person. I'll talk to a wall if you let me.
Or your food.
Or my food. So being in this space where all of a sudden it was the complete opposite of what had always been natural for me. I thought at one point I had a tumor. Like, I went and got checked out by neuroscientists. I did an MRI, a CT scan. I did all of it. And it was all anxiety. It was all grief, So the fact of the matter is that the physiological grasp that we have, and especially the way that it can present itself through our traumas and through our certain events, we can call it that, is very real and it's very debilitating. And so to kind of want to stay in that debilitative state rather than to say, you know what, I'm going to turn this around. I'm going to do something with this. And this is now the fire in my belly that just gives me that willingness and that passion to be able to move forward in life. I don't think can really last too long. And I think anybody that has been through something and has moved past it can notice that in another human being. I think you can see the passion. I think you can see the struggle, and you can see that you've come across through the finish line better than what you started. Or you can allow for it to really hinder your ability to continue to grow. And you can allow for it to be, that continued vortex that just, takes you with it year in and year out. And I mean, I personally didn't want to live that way. I was tired of living that way. And so it was very much an autonomous decision to be able to move forward.
Yeah, I like that. You said, you quoted earlier in the show when we were talking, you said, if somebody's willing to teach me, I'm willing to learn. and just having that, like Angeli and we talk a lot about just having a growth mindset. And you work for a company that's called Aspen Growth Coaching. So tell us a little bit about your thoughts on just growth mindset and just lifelong learning in general. Like, what does that mean to you?
Wow, that's a loaded question. So autonomy has always been something that has been a very personal endeavor of mine. I've always been very independent. I don't like people telling me what to do. I don't like people telling me how to live. And so learning what health and wellness means to me is very different than what it could mean to the both of you, right? And so that also means that my progression from my trauma was very individual to what it would be like for the both of you. And so having that empathy and having that knowledge, I don't want people to stay with me forever and ever. I mean, I would love their money, but I want them to, more than money, I think them being able to be successful in life and turning around in a few months from now and saying, Karla, I walked into a conference all by myself when this a year ago I would have passed out. You know, having that level of interaction with human beings where I've been there and I've done that. And I wish somebody had been there for me the way that I'm there for others. You know, I wish somebody would have told me like, hey, I did this not so long ago. This just happened to me, because I thought I was losing my mind. I thought I was dying in many ways. And so having that autonomy and having somebody that's not just a clinician sit across from me and tell me, well, let's unpack that a little bit and let's think this through a little bit more. And so not to take away from therapists, because I love them all, but I wanted something more action oriented. I wanted to yes, for somebody to be informed as to what happened, but not necessarily bring it up every single time that I sat across from them. I wanted to move away from that and move forward, not live in this constant stagnation of like, yes, it happened. Okay, I understand. Like, let's move forward. And that has always perhaps been my thing. Like, I just have this incessant need to continue moving forward. I have a mom, so I can't really sit behind, you know? And so after many years of working in the residential model where, you know, unfortunately, I saw the same clients sit across from me, and that's another podcast. That's another day, going down that vortex of just the residential model and what that can unfortunately mean for many. I decided to pull away from that. You know, I've got skin in the game. I've lost a loved one to this disease, and my family has suffered a lot to it. So I'd be damned if I'm going to be the person that's going to be part of this problem. And so onwards, as I usually do. And I think the more we talk about what our values are, people are listening. You know, people will listen and people will seek you out. And that's exactly how I came about Aspen Growth Coaching. And I met Alex and I'm like, at some point, you and I are going to work together. Like, this needs to happen. And she didn't have a position for me at the moment. And so I created one. So I worked towards creating my own position and thinking that this was going to take months. It took me 10 days to have a full caseload. Wow. So, you know, I think with the spirit of, I want this and I'm going to do everything that I can in order to put myself in a place of, you know, the universe or whatever your God is to provide, then it'll happen.
Yeah. Well, and that's what it is, right? It's the action. It's taking action feels like the scarier thing versus just staying where you're at, whether it's processing trauma or grief or creating opportunities in your life. That's the safe option, right? Like, our brain tells us, hey, you're safe here. Don't worry about doing the work, or don't worry about doing this because I've got you. I'm safe here. And so the harder step is addressing the trauma and doing the things and taking the scary action to achieve your goals. And so for those people who are maybe that you're working with, or just family, friends that you're talking to, what's your advice for them when they are kind of in that stagnant standstill, scared to take that next step towards their dreams or their goals?
That's a loaded question. Wow, you guys have been giving me a lot of questions. It's difficult because I think for me, it's always been very internal. It's always been about listening to that other voice that's kind of in the back burner telling me otherwise. Because we always, and I like bringing this back to like science, you have your hypothesis and you have your null hypothesis. You always have to challenge these thoughts with something else. Like you always have, yes, the like the mental sneeze of the thought, which is where your mind kind of always goes towards, but you always have something there that's challenging that thought. And so I've always put myself, and again, I'll talk to from my perspective, and this is what I tell my clients, is listen to that other voice. Listen to what else is out there. What else is your mind telling you to do? Because at a certain point, you're not, like, that's not going to be enough. Sure, it could be enough for day one, maybe for week one, maybe for month one. We've all had those months. But at a certain point, you want more. At a certain point, you're going to look at yourself in the mirror and say, okay, all right, let's move this along. And so for me, it's always been listening to that other, I don't know, that other little mental sneeze that kind of sneaks up in the background.
Oh, that's cool. So, and I believe that surrounding yourself with the right people, and you mentioned that earlier, just in your career path, just in life, surrounding yourself with the right people that are going to help you move forward, and not hold you back is key. And I think a big part of the model is what it sounds like. You know, we spoke to Alex previously, but you guys have really created something really cool there at Aspen Growth, and just really that relationship-based model where you're walking alongside somebody and you don't want to keep them in that same cycle. Like you're there for as long as they need you, but you know, the goal is to maybe then scale it back, but they always know that you're in their corner no matter what, even if they've, you know, healed from maybe whatever acute thing it is that they had happening at that moment in time. Is just surrounding yourself with people who care and want to see you grow and succeed and do better.
Oh, absolutely. I can't speak enough to that. You've got to find your tribe. I mean, I went through such an intentional, and I mean this, intentional purging period in the relational aspect, both in my personal and my professional life. And that was really difficult. That was really, really difficult because of so many reasons. Yet another podcast, but
we'll see you back 2 more times then.
But I think being intentional about who I give my energy to and who I open up to is extremely, extremely monumental in my daily life. And that is whether I'm driving down I-95 in South Florida, which we know, we've got to make daily choices about what our energy is going to consist of in that day, right? And so that's something I mean, I'm presenting very happy and very chipper, but this is not always it, right? I have my days. And that is an very active and very present and very difficult thing for me to do. It is not by any means something that comes natural to me. It's not, it's something I put into practice and it's hard work. But I'm very selective about who I let in. I'm very selective about, I've constructed this peace bubble, right? And not everybody gets into that peace bubble, right? And growing up, at least for me, that meant I let family and everybody in. And I've been so selective about who I keep in that bubble and who I let in and who I nurture. But I definitely do take care of those who are within that bubble. You know, that's Alex, that's my coworkers, that's my team, that's my partner, my daughter, my parents. And I'm very intentional about that. It's not just what are they going to give me, is I am constantly outputting love and energy and nurturing and just showing people that I care. And in doing that, I think people have like this bond with you that they're just loyal, and we all need that. We all need that loyalty too.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I love that because I think especially in a world where it is overrun by social media, and like you mentioned earlier, oh, let's just share everything, right? And that's maybe not the best place of your energy, because then you have the trolls and you have the haters and the ones who are judging your actions without having the full story. And so scaling it back and just saying, yeah, who is in my tribe? Who's got my back? Who is going to be there? And who is someone I want to invest in as well? Because it's in a superficial world on social media, it's kind of hard to tell who your true friends are. And so
it's exhausting.
It's so exhausting, so mentally draining. And so, and especially probably for teenagers who are still, developing their brain. They're still learning the things and how to differentiate. Like, it's exhausting for adults. And so for those who are still learning and finding themselves, it's such a challenge. And so I love that you, be intentional with your time, with your energy, and who you let in, because that's your sanity. That's your health.
I am intentionally selfish with my energy, and I love it.
Yeah. Well, and so you bring up another good point. Like, I think it's, especially for those people pleasers out there, it's, oh no, I can't say no. I can't do this. I just need to give to everybody.
My favorite word.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's healthy to set boundaries, and it's okay to say no. And I think the earlier that someone can learn that, the just better off they are, because then they can have their own mental health, their own boundaries, and their own sanity, versus just being depleted repeatedly by people who just don't even appreciate.
I came across this quote that, and I can't take credit for it. It's not my quote. I don't know who said it, but it was, say no to the good things and save your yeses for the best things. And I was like, oh, that's a good way of thinking about boundaries. So anyway, just wanted to share that.
And it's interesting because usually what should be no's is a very visceral reaction, right? Like, you feel it in your body. Your palms get sweaty, you get all uneasy, your chest gets kind of tight, your neck kind of perks up. Usually that's a no. If you're feeling that way towards something, I mean, I hope you say no.
Yes. Yeah. Listen to your body. Your body knows. Like, if you're physically sick, like, okay, let's not go
if
that
your
route.
gut is telling you something, I mean, we should listen to it.
Yes.
Agreed.
So true.
Agreed.
Awesome. Well,
so
sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say that we, like we mentioned earlier, we have a lot of kids right now, adolescents. I say kids, they're all at a certain age. I feel like everybody younger than you becomes kids, but many are in residential treatment, which we had this conversation a little bit ago with Alex, and there is a time and a place for that, and we can appreciate that. But we may have some families that are just transitioning and looking for what the next steps are, and they're coming out of a situation where they don't have that one-on-one direct staff care support anymore, and are looking for something else. So I just wanted you to speak a little bit about what that process might look like for families. You work with a lot of families that I'm sure are in that same boat, either looking for an alternative or just coming out of that setting. How can they work with somebody like you, and what would they expect? We talked a little bit about the relationship model. What does that look like for somebody if they're interested in moving forward to something like that?
So it's very personal. Every family is different, and therefore the way that we work with that family is going to be different. The beauty in what we do is that we go to the family system rather than to the individual patient or client. We look at the family model and we figure out, okay, this kid is the one that's presenting because of their behaviors, because they're the ones that don't know how to regulate just yet. But this goes far beyond just this kid. And so if you're willing to really do the work and really roll up your sleeves and, be uncomfortable for some time, I'll be in that discomfort with you, and our coaches will be in that discomfort with you, and we'll really have the hard conversations. Now, the idea is that residential is just an intervention model. They don't need to be placement after placement after placement. The idea is that they're there once, and that's it. And we figure out what happened, and we get to the root cause and the epicenter of what is damaging this family nucleus. And so that can be very difficult and very different for everybody, right? Because if we're not just talking about one person, we're talking about an entire family system, whatever that may be, that could involve uncles and cousins and this and that. And so what the beauty in what we do is we bring everybody. We work with the entire system to figure out where the faulty lines are, and how do we regulate to a position where everybody is considering everybody, and everybody is working in this state of progression rather than pointing fingers and whatever the case may be. And so we're very successful at that because we're getting in there. We're getting in there. We're not afraid. We got the thick skin, been there, done that, and I'm out. I'm out, and I'm much better because of it. So let me teach you how.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. And so before we let you go, one final question that we ask to all of our guests, because we always love to hear the wisdom from people who have been there, they've been in it, that type of stuff. If you were able to give your high school self some advice, what advice would you give to yourself?
Oh no.
Another
question for Karla. She's like, I hate you guys.
Oh my gosh. Wow. If I was able to give my high school self, oh my gosh, I can't curse here. Okay, so I would tell myself to be much kinder to myself. You know, I needed that kindness. I needed somebody to tell me that they're going through the exact same thing or similar to what my internal thoughts were. And I wish I would have had somebody like that tell me. However, I am so appreciative of what those thoughts taught me and the depth that it allowed me to get into my own mind. Because if it wasn't for that, I don't think I would have allowed myself to kind of springboard into where I'm at today. So I think those deep depths that I've been to and those dark, really dark places that I've been in have allowed for me to just have just this enormous appreciation and passion for life and for what I do. So, you know, I would have loved the kindness, but I kind of enjoyed the fact that that made me into the hard ass that I am today. And I think, you know, I think people need that. You know, I think that darkness makes us appreciate the light, and it makes that, you know, I think that would have been it, kindness.
Yeah, no, I love that. And you also bring up a good point of, even though it's so hard when you're going through it and you're dealing with these struggles and challenges, it's when you come out on the other side and say, hey, I conquered that, or hey, I'm better because of this. You can still appreciate the journey, even though it's so hard and you want to rip your hair out and just, I'm done, right?
Yeah.
When you come out on that other side, it's like, yes. And then your thoughts are those kind thoughts of, hey, I did this. This is who I am.
And now I know myself. Now I'm like, oh, that's my progress. I go to anxiety first. Let me give this 24 hours and see how I feel about it tomorrow.
Yeah, totally. That's awesome.
Great wisdom. Wow. I love that. Things to remember too. Like just for my own personal life. It's I love doing these interviews because, like, you know, we're doing this for an audience, but I just, the little nuggets of wisdom that we get from everybody that comes on, it's just like, oh wow, I can apply that in my life. All right, noted.
Yeah, we all go through it. Trust me. I'm a clinician and I still go through anxiety every day. So
we all have our stuff. That's so true. So awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Karla. We really appreciate your insights.
I love being here.
Yeah. So thanks so much.
Thank you, ladies.